Hi, I'm Katrina, your Pilates teacher at Pilates. Today I would like to talk about the relationship between the breathing, the centering, the movement and the stability to make sure you get the most out of your Pilates exercises. So let's begin. If you've followed any of my videos, you will find that I give quite a few teaching points, and some are about the movement, some are about the breathing, some are about the centering, and then some are about what's the staying still, your stability. And those four things really go hand in hand. And in the beginning it can be all a little bit too much to coordinate and remember it all, and that's absolutely fine, so don't stress out about that, but in time it will sink in. Once we're a bit more familiar with an exercise, we can then add other layers. So your first layer would always be the breathing, so starting to work with when to breathe in and when to breathe out. And there's a video I made earlier about the different kinds of breathing we use in our practice. But usually if it's a strength or endurance exercise, we would use our lateral breath, breathing into the ribs. And the movement then follows the breath. So instead of just creating the movement on its own, for example a knee drop, you would then go into breathing out through the whole exhalation, and you keep moving throughout the whole exhalation. You only get to the last part of that movement at the end of that exhalation. And then as you breathe in, you use the whole in-breath to reverse the movement, to come back to where you started. So it's really the breath that would then sort of dictate the tempo of the exercise. And we do try and create a really nice, deep, slow breath using our lateral breath, eventually at least. So we don't really create a staccato movement. We're not just going to move the leg and the breath is sort of still happening and then move the leg back. It's very, very little, especially the way I teach Pilates is sort of in short, sharp movements. It always tends to be quite sort of fluid. And we really want to go with the ebb and flow of the breath. So you breathe out, and in, and then out, and in. And I'm just sort of miming knee drops. And I will explain this with the exercise at the end as well, just to give that context to what I'm talking about here. But it really doesn't apply only to knee drops. It really does apply to any exercise that sort of moves through a range of movement. Where the static ones like the 100 or any planks, it's a little bit different for those sort of exercises. Good. So the movement and the breath are connected. We then have the centering that can be added into that sequence. So on the effort, we breathe out. And on the effort, we want to center. So drawing the navel in a little bit, and just as much as we need to. As I say in the centering video, you don't just want to squeeze the belly back, you don't just want to switch everything on just in case, or as much as you possibly can. That's not going to be helpful. So just as the movement follows the ebb and flow of the breath, so does the centering switch on a little bit more on the effort and a little bit less as we come back to where we started. So for example, for a knee drop, I lower the knee to the side. That's a bit more difficult. I have to draw the navel in a little bit more to keep everything still, and then I breathe into the ribs. I return, and then in tabletop, this is tabletop, we just come to the base tension we need to support our tabletop or double knee fold position. And again, I will show this in a moment with the actual exercise. So the fourth part in that equation is the stability. And that can be tricky, where we very often focus on what's moving. We focus on creating the movement. But if we then actually focus on what's staying still, which is the other side, that can really help just with that aware of that stable part. What's keeping us stable, what's supporting us. And especially once we get to the more challenging exercises or the more complex exercises with the other arm or so opposite arm to leg movements, then that's very helpful to think about what's staying still. And that's the stability part of those four components. So I will just show this in knee drops. The first version of knee drops is keeping the feet on the floor, where you lower one knee and then return and then lower the other knee. I would always suggest to start with this version or come back to this version to really work with those 4 components and put them back together. It's a slightly easier one. There's a little less to be concerned about, just in terms of keeping the pelvis and spine neutral, which we want to do, but there's less load, so it's easier to do. So if we then start with the actual movement, one knee goes to the side and comes back, and then the other knee. So one leg is moving. And as I said, we'll always start with focusing on the movement, then we. So once we know, okay, this is the movement, and the focus is on keeping the pelvis still. That's our aim, to keep our spine and pelvis still. Just like in so many of our exercises. So the contrast to that would be to just let the leg go and everything else is moving as well. That's what we don't want. So we just move the leg on its own. If we then add in the breath, I breathe out and use the whole exhalation. And then use the inhalation to come back. Breathing out. Breathing in. So I breathe out, I let the leg move through that breath, and then I breathe into my ribs to come back. So I don't breathe into my belly. Breathe out. Use the whole exhalation. Breathe into the ribs to come back. So that's the breath. We then add the centering. So on the effort, as the leg lowers down, as I breathe out, I draw the navel in a little bit more. So I breathe in to prepare, breathe out to lower. And I draw my navel in a bit at the same time, just as much as I need to maintain that stability here. I breathe into my ribs to maintain that connection. And then out. Draw the navel in a bit more. Breathe into the ribs. And release the center a bit. One more of those. Breathe out, draw the navel in a bit. Breathe into the ribs. And release the tension around the belly button. One more time. Good. And then the fourth component was our stability. So doing the same thing as we've just done, but then focus on what's staying still. So I breathe in to prepare, I breathe out to lower. And the other knee stays still, my pelvis stays still, my spine stays still. The shoulders stay relaxed. They very often want to help, don't they? Breathe out, draw the navel in. Keep the other knee still, the pelvis stays still, the spine stays still. Breathe into the ribs. And slowly release the connection. So when we then do that in tabletop, we just feel the connection a bit more, because it's a bit more challenging. So breathe into the ribs, breathe out to lower, draw the navel in, keep the other knee still, keep the pelvis still, keep the spine still. Breathe into the ribs, release the tension back to that base, tension you need just to be here. Breathe out, draw the navel in a bit more, focus on what's staying still. Use the whole inhalation to return. And release the tension back to your base tension. Connecting a bit more. Connecting a bit less. Keeping the other knee still. Keeping spine and pelvis still. Have a quick stretch if you follow along.